The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Onyx Fantasy. Go to 3 times your entry at the pick 8. So the promo code SGPN, the coin special pick in the first time deposit offer up to $2 in bonus cash. Onyx Fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Rhythm is loaded with a ton of picks for the British Open. Claim your 70 free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com. Rhythm, sportsgamblingpodcast.com, /RATHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently Sunday night, roughly 9:15 p.m. Eastern Time on July 21st. I'm your host, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode, but of a longer one because we do have 3 tournaments to preview in Atlanta, Kitzbuhel, and Umag. So we have 2 clay events in Europe and 1 hardcourt event in Atlanta. A reminder, this is the final week of tournaments before we have the Olympics. So keep that in mind. Point is, should be fun. We'll have to admit, though, we have no quarter odds for any of these events. So we're going to go straight into the outright picks for each of them. So the event breakdowns should be not too short, but also not insanely long because we have no quarter odds to actually preview. So starting off with the usual housekeeping, I got to start off by reminding everybody once again to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also, reminder, don't forget to review the podcast on Spotify or Apple. I've seen the subscribers go up a lot recently on YouTube, so thank you to everybody who has subscribed. If not, then don't forget to hit that button to get notified of when we'll be having more episodes. Point is, for the Olympics, I do want to mention, we will have an episode for every round. So we're going to treat it like it's a 1,000 event. In case you're worried, we are going to cover the Olympics every single round. Also, a reminder, don't forget to check out the SGPN merch store because we have a lot of great Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have shirts, sweatshirts, and mugs. So a lot of great overall content to be found on the merch store, not just for our show, but also for the other shows with the network. And the featured show for this week is actually the Mothership Show. It is the Sports Gambling Podcast because they are starting their college football breakdowns. They are getting ready for college football with their conference previews. Tune in wherever you do get your podcasts or on the SGPN app. So for starters, got to recap how we did in the last episode and the actual matches that happened on Sunday. Not going to spend too much time on them. We're going to spend some. Starting off with the lock and dog recap, unfortunately, did go 0-2 with those picks. For the lock, we had the Berrettini and Hallis over half a tiebreak at -137. Wasn't that close. Got off to a decent start. Then Berrettini broke relatively early, or I should say in the middle of the first set, and then he owned Hallis after that, as I think he ended up winning, trying to remember, 9 of the last 10 games or something. He absolutely dominated the rest of the match. So the point is, Berrettini kind of started off a bit slow, and then he hit a gear, and Hallis had no answer, so really not that close to hitting the lock there. For the dog, kind of annoying. We ended up having the over 2.5 sets in the Borges and Nadal match at +150. We expected Borges to win a set. I said that on the show. The problem was Borges to win a set was -145. So we ended up gambling on Nadal not to get absolutely buried for a shot of +150, and Nadal got absolutely buried, so we picked up a loss there. So unfortunately, ended up getting reverse swept. It's the first time that's happened in a couple weeks at this point. We were on a great run in tennis, and unfortunately, things kind of came to a screeching halt there, at least for the lock and dog picks. The outrights did very well on Sunday, which we'll get into in a second. Do you want to recap the actual title matches first? I just mentioned Nadal losing in straight sets to Borges. Borges won his first ever ATP title, so good for him. One of the easiest paths I've ever seen in a actual tournament, ATP level tournament, besides actual, I'd say, skill level in terms of Nadal, for example, solely based on ranking. It was an absolute gift. I don't believe he beat anybody in the top 120, 130. So Borges had a draw of a lifetime, and he capitalized on it. Not Borges' fault. I mean, he's going to beat whoever's in front of him. And it's not his fault that people kept losing around him. But Nadal was his final opponent, and beating Nadal on clay, no matter how old and fatigued he was, to win a clay title is still pretty cool. So props to Borges for getting the job done and winning in straight sets. Unfortunately, he screwed us in the process, but Nadal looked absolutely cooked physically. Not surprised. Once again, I've mentioned this many times before. When you're looking at the older players, the reason why they really have a hard time winning events late in their careers isn't really involving the earlier rounds. It's about actually overcoming playing on consecutive days with no rest and no recovery time. And Nadal having to play 6+ hours in the quarterfinal match and the semifinal match combined, he had nothing left in the tank for Borges, and Borges dominated. So either way, nice win there for Borges at a pretty nice plus money price. For the other upset, on the actual card, you had Zverev, who actually had to win the event at +187, and he lost to Fies in his home country of Germany. So overall, a lot to really unpack with that match. Not going to spend too much time on it. Really came down to one stat, which is embarrassing on so many levels. Zverev, who's a top 5 player in the world, who made the French Open final about a month ago, went 1 of 22 on breakpoint chances. 1 of 22. Are you out of your mind? 1 of 22 against Fees. That's how he lost. He could not convert a break point. There were a ton of deuces. Basically, the entire third set was full of deuces. But it felt like every single Fees return game, Fees service games, Zverev got to 40, and he just couldn't win the game. It just happened every time. He did get the one break in the middle of the second set, the only set that he won. But he had a bunch of chances in the third set, did not convert. And then once he ended up not converting at the end of the third set, he kind of packed it in for the tiebreak. It just seemed like Fees was willing to go the extra mile and was willing to kind of go for it. And Zverev just seemed like he mentally checked out once he got to the breaker. So I don't want to say that he fully quit on the match because that sounds disrespectful to Fees, who played very well. But based on body language and based on the overall, I'd say, momentum of the breaker, it just seemed like Zverev wanted to get out of there, and it seemed like he rolled over. So props to Fees for getting the job done. We did like the over 2.5 sets in that matchup. That got there. Thought the line was disrespectful in favor of Zverev. Thought he would win, but I did think there was some value on Fees, and he got the job done. But the over 2.5 sets was a good read on that one. Besides that, we have the good news for our picks, because even though we did lose the lock and dog picks, we did get 2 outrights that worked in our favor. We had Berrettini to win Gustad at plus 600, and that got there. Did not drop a set in the entire event, so nice job by him, and he ended up winning it for the second time. So props to Berrettini for getting us the outright winner there. And for the late match in Newport, we had Giron at plus 750. Not easy. Did drop the first set to Mickelson in a breaker. Then he came back and he won the next 2 sets. Fun match, was competitive. Did like the over 2.5 sets there too. So overall, not a bad day on the totals for at least the over 2.5 sets, because those were a decent amount of plus money. But for the sake of the actual picks, even though the lock and dog picks did not go well for Sunday, we had a good day. Because we ended up cashing a 6-1 and a 750 for the outrights. Should have been a 187 in there too, but Zverev choked it. So overall, can't complain. Anytime you end up cashing 2 of the 4 tournament outrights, and not to mention all the quarter bets that we ended up winning. With Hallis at like 750, Fees was 450. We had a very good overall week, so hopefully that carries over into the 3 events taking place for the upcoming week. Looking at the comment section, I see people jumping into the comment section. Shout out to Cayetano. He mentioned that he had Zverev over 2.5 breaks. Damn, that's rough. Boy. That's really, really bad. I got nothing else to say for you. 1 of 22, and you have the over 2.5. That is really rough. It's why I think he'll never win a Grand Slam. I know he's been close before. I wasn't really about the actual break points. Of course, that's really bad. The main issue for me was how he completely just rolled over. Kind of once Fees tried the underarm serve that failed, it seemed like Zverev mentally switched gears to being angry at Fees and kind of lost focus on the actual match. But the breaker was inexcusable. He just completely punted the breaker, basically, and Fees took it from him as he ended up jumping out to like a 4 or 5-0 lead in the breaker. Zverev wanted nothing to do with that breaker, and that's kind of why I have a hard time trusting Zverev to win a Grand Slam in his career. Now, he has been closer than... Actually, I'm trying to think of how many times Tsitsipas has made a Grand Slam final, because Zverev ended up losing to Thiem in the COVID year US Open, ended up losing to, of course, Alcaraz, and I think those are the only 2 times he's been there. Tsitsipas lost in the Australian Open final to Djokovic, and he also lost in the French Open final to Djokovic. So you can argue that there's actually a pretty decent comp based on Tsitsipas and Zverev. Zverev is a bit more consistent, but in terms of not getting over the finish line in these massive matches, there's some type of mental block there, where it just seems like when things don't go Zverev's way or don't go Tsitsipas's way, they're going to implode or roll over or both more often than not. That's kind of my takeaway from that matchup. And Zverev, once he just could not break Fees in that third set, he had enough. And he ended up kind of basically quitting in the breaker as far as I'm concerned. Good overall week, though, for us. Hopefully that carries over into the next tournaments that we're going to cover. So before we get into any of the actual tournaments, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, because they have a pick 8, which allows you the opportunity to win 35 times your entry. You can now use specials and boosts on all flex entries. And for pick 8s, I'll be using a bunch of baseball stuff moving forward, because the WNBA, of course, is off for a month based on the Olympics. Also, a reminder, the Underdog Fantasy does have a new college football best ball product. First place does win $20K. So don't forget to check out both of those I'd say opportunities before they are gone. Sign up the promo code SGPN. They're going to special pick in a first-time deposit offer up to $2 bonus cash on a fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Circa Survivor and Circa Millions. Circa Sports is back with Circa Survivor and Circa Millions, giving away $16 million in guaranteed prizes. And of course, Circa contests have no rake. Circa Millions pick 5 NFL teams ATS each week and compete for $6 million to survive the NFL Gauntlet and NFL Survivor to claim the $10 million prize. Sign up in person at Circa Sports between now and September 7th and use a proxy to play from anywhere. We even have a deal with footballcontestproxy.com to give you $50 with promo code SGP. Don't have a trip booked yet for Las Vegas. For football, Ultimate Cut this weekend's a great time to go. Hang out with Ryan and Sean and enjoy some of the open bar events at the World's Bet Sportsbook from August 22nd through the 24th. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened on Sunday and also taking a bit of a victory lap for our outright winners with Berrettini and Giron. Now it's time to keep it rolling. Looking at the upcoming week, once again, the final week before the Olympics, so keep that in mind. But we have 2 clay events, and we have a hard court event, all 250s, so it should be a fun time. Looking forward to breaking those down. For the order, we're going to go based on when the matches start on Monday. So the order will be Kitzbuhel first, Umag, and then Atlanta. Of course, Atlanta is going to be last because it's in the U.S. It's going to be a bit of a weird week for actual recording because the one thing I do hate about the American or the North American schedule in tennis is how late they finish the matches because it really impacts the record time. So I'm not sure how effectively we're going to be able to actually cover Atlanta for the upcoming week. Just a spoiler, so keep that in mind. Usually, I try to record at like 9 or 10 o'clock. Matches are still happening in Atlanta. So it's going to definitely impact some of my ability to actually recap and preview the upcoming matches in Atlanta. So we might have to punt part of the midweek for Atlanta. Keep that in mind. But we are going to cover Kitzbuhel and Umag in general. So moving on to Kitzbuhel. This one is going to be taking place in Austria, by the way, if you're not familiar with where Kitzbuhel is. So for this one, to recap who won in the last couple of years, Baez did win, as he ended up beating Thiem, who had a home country Cinderella run. In hindsight, no clue how he made the final, but Baez killed him in the final. So he ended up getting a title there. Batista Gut ended up beating Misolic, another Cinderella Austrian who made a solid run. Ruud ended up beating Martinez. Kekmanovic ended up beating Hanfmann. So you have had different winners in the last couple of iterations of this event. Now, a reminder that I have no actual quarter odds for the event. So we are going to jump right in to the actual outrights to win the event. Starting off with the, let's say, shortest odds, you have Berrettini, actually, who is right now projected to be in the event. Do I think he's going to participate? Probably not. If I had to guess, it doesn't make any sense for him to. I know he's missed a lot of time with the injuries that he's been suffering from for the last year and change, but he just won a clay title. The Olympics are up next on clay. Why would he be here? I think that he's going to punt it, so I am going to stay away from Berrettini in all my outright picks. I think it makes a lot of sense for him to skip this event. He got the tune-up he needed, didn't drop a set on clay. Now he has the Olympics. I don't see any point. So I think Berrettini will drop out, so that's kind of what I'm expecting for the upcoming week. Might have to wait a bit, but he does have actually a first-round matchup because he is not a high enough seed. So right now his overall draw is Kotov in the first round, then Tabilo in the second round. Really not a great draw for him anyway. I think he drops out, so I'm not expecting Berrettini to be in this tournament for much longer. Tabilo, though, speaking of which, is the second favorite at plus 450. Baez is 550. Echeverry is 650. Martinez is 16-1. Borges, fresh off the title. I don't think he's going to participate either because Portugal really does not have many solid tennis players. So I just see Borges participating in the Olympics. So I don't think he's going to actually be there for the event. Point is, though, you have Baena at around 18-1. You have Munard 18-1. Diaz Acosta 20-1. Degier 20-1. Fuxovic 22-1. Kotov 25-1. Tarante is at 28-1. Coria is at 28-1 as well. And then you have a couple of longer shots. Team is 33-1 if you want to go for the Cinderella repeat to a final. Anyway, for the sake of the actual outright picks, trying to filter through who I think will not be here because the Olympics are next week. Borges not being here makes a lot of sense, and Berrettini makes all the sense in the world, especially based on his injury history. So I'm going to chalk both those guys up to not playing. So just keep that in mind. For the outright picks, though, I am going to start off with a couple of favorites. I really did not go too crazy. I went pretty safe with these actual events. I have a couple of longer shots in Atlanta, but for the sake of the clay events, I really went conservative because I don't know what the motivation is for a lot of players. You have some players who are waiting for the Olympics, some players who are passed over for the Olympics. So I think those guys, of course, will care more. But the point is, there is some reason to worry about motivation for some guys. So I'm not going to go too crazy with these two clay events that we're going to talk about. For Kitzbuhel, though, I am going to go with Tabilo at 5-1. It's also tricky because he has the Olympics coming up and he's been very solid for Chile. So I have to acknowledge it. But he's been great this year. He's made multiple finals. He's won a couple titles, and I think that he is in solid form. And if you're talking about a tune-up event before the Olympics, the last event he did play in was Wimbledon. So it does make sense, even though he has the Olympics up next, for him to get some run on clay before they go back to Roland Garros for Paris Olympics. So I am going to go with Tabilo at 5-1. He's turning into one of my favorite players just based on how consistently he's come through for us so far this year. We've done well with outrights with him, with overall lock and dog picks with him. He's solid, and he's good on clay. So I am going to go with Tabilo at 5-1. I am going to go with the defending champion, though. Baez at 6-1. Baez maybe drops as well, but I do think that he is good enough to get the job done here. And we saw it last year as he ended up winning the title. Kitzbuhel does seem to benefit players that are better with the overall rally and court coverage skills. And going through the winners, you have Baez, Agut, you have Ruud, Kekmanovic. You get my point. You don't exactly have the guys that aren't capable of covering the court and the guys that are willing to last a long time in individual rallies. And I think that is definitely Baez's strength. I think Baez has the court coverage and the overall talent on clay to obviously get the job done. And if Berrettini does drop, Baez's odds should drop from 6-1 to like probably 450, give or take. So I'm going to try to gamble on it, but give me the defending champion at a good price at 6-1. And for the next one, I am going to go with a longer shot, a guy that actually had a decent run in Hamburg last week. Did lose to Zverev, not really his fault, made a good run anyway. I am going to go Martinez at 18-1. Solid clay player. We saw him make a clay final earlier this year. Ended up losing to Hurkacz, I believe, in that one. Saw him make a semifinal run in Hamburg over the past week. So I do think he's in good form. And Spain does have a lot of very solid players for the Olympics. So Martinez probably won't be involved in that area. So I do think that he should be able to focus on this event only. But 18-1 for a solid clay player, I think is I'd say it's a pretty favorable draw as well. I do like that prospect, and I do think he has some value, especially with a bye. Martinez randomly has a bye in this event. Now, he might face off against Klein in the second round. Klein's facing off against Nagal, so keep that in mind. But he would face off against either Borges, Galan, Coria, or Acosta Diaz. Or Diaz Acosta, I mean. That's a really tough foursome. So I'll let Martinez feast on the scraps. And I think looking at who he face off after that, he would get Baez. So I have to admit that is not the best draw. But I think 18-1 is a good price, and I do think you're looking at a guy who definitely has the skill to make a deep run here. He actually did make a deep run here a couple of years ago, as Martinez did lose to Ruud in the final about 3 years ago. So he has made a deep run here before. He's in solid form, and he has made a clay final earlier this year. Martinez is a solid clay player. The issue for him for the last couple of years has been injuries. He's healthy, good enough for me. Give me a long shot flyer at 18-1. On Martinez. If you want to go for the bottom half of the bracket, by the way, and if you wanted to potentially fade, if you wanted to fade Berrettini, that kind of just checks right into Tabilo's draw. So I think Tabilo, once again, is going to be my main pick for that bottom section. Not really impressed by the overall talent in the field. I would have made a case for Echeverry or maybe like a Seabolt Wild, but he's been in bad form, and that overall section is not great either. Echeverry, Hanfman, Munar, Seabolt Wild, and De Geer. That's really not an easy section by any means. So I'll let them kill each other. Give me Tabilo at 5-1. Give me Baez at 6-1, and give me Martinez as my long shot at 18-1. Moving on to the next one. By the way, question from Bill asking me where I end up betting my tennis futures. A lot of different books. Now I am in New York, so not all books are available, but I either use BetMGM, use DraftKings, sometimes offshore as well. I have some locals, too, that have it. So pretty much wherever you can actually find tennis futures. But New York does have some books that are available. FanDuel tends to have the best lines, in my experience, on legal books. But the issue is FanDuel really is kind of lazy when it comes to posting its future odds. So sometimes FanDuel, usually not. But Caesars sometimes has. BetMGM usually does. DraftKings usually does. So mostly BetMGM and DraftKings. Sometimes Bet365, I'll call in a favor and I'll have somebody bet it for me, but usually those books are the ones that I end up using. For the sake of the odds I'm mentioning, by the way, I'm trying to remember where I got some of these odds. Some of them were from offshore. The odds I'm reading off are BetMGM. So just keep that in mind, just based on convenience. But I bet all these on basically local books available in New York. Bet Rivers as well, should mention, does have some tennis futures that you can look into as well. Moving on to Umag, the other clay event. So for this one, recent winners, Papiron ended up beating Wawrinka in a very fun three-setter last year. Sinner ended up beating Alcaraz in the final a couple years ago. Alcaraz did beat Gasquet in the final a couple years ago as well. So unlike Kitzbuhel, it does seem like firepower is a solid recipe for success in Umag. So keep that in mind. And I do think that should be something I'm focusing on for the event, at least for guys that I think can make a deep run. Now, the issue is the field has some top-heavy guys, some guys that are ranked highly. However, they're in really bad form. So the problem is you have guys like Rune and Rublev, who conceptually the courts suit very well. The problem is I can't trust either guy, so I'm going to have to try to get creative. But once again, I'm not going too crazy on the actual outright picks this week. I was relatively light on the outrights. I have 2 picks for this event. I have one of the favorites, and I also have a long shot. And then I have kind of the crazy section there in Atlanta. But for the actual outright picks, to read off the odds for the event in Umag. So for the outrights, for the favorite in this event, I mentioned it before. Sorry, just trying to find the odds. I think BetMGM actually just closed the odds on me. So I'm going to have to quickly try to scramble. Let me just see if I can find it again. Yeah, they pulled it. Fantastic. Mid-show. So let me just quickly pull up the odds on DraftKings. But this is what I'm talking about. You have to sometimes bounce around between different books to find odds that are up. But hopefully DraftKings has it. They do not. Of course they don't. So now I got to scramble. Anyway, I got to find where to actually get the outright picks here. Let me check Bet365. I have my picks laid out, though, but to read off the actual draw, or I should say to read off the actual people that are favored in this event, you have Rublev and you have Rune. So to start off with those 2 guys, I'll pull up the odds as I talk, but the point is those 2 guys are the main threats to get the job done, and based on the winning history of guys in this event with the firepower they possess, it does seem like a very good court for both guys. However, Rublev's been a disaster for the last couple of months, and Rune we know we can't trust, and he also retired in his last match, and the Olympics are up next, so why would he bother? Like, I just feel like it's a weird spot for those 2 guys. Rublev as well might want to get some clay action in before the Olympics. Did last week, ended up losing to Tarante in his first match. But Rublev is at plus 350. Rune's at plus 450. Cerundolo's at 550. I'm not taking Cerundolo. Guy's an absolute head case. Mussetti's at 6-1. Sonego's at 14-1. Makic is 14-1. Darderi's 14-1. Navone's 18-1. Morozin's 18-1. Papiron defending champions 20-1. Montero's 22-1. Gaboli's 25-1. Moore is 28-1. Fognini is 33-1, and then you have a couple of long shots, so I don't think I have a shot. I will mention, though, Lajovic in passing at 40-1. So to get into the actual path of the players, Rublev's draw is favorable, but I can't trust this damn guy. Like, if you want to take Rublev at an ultimate low, I understand it. I can't do it. I just can't stand the way he's played recently, and I've tried to give him out. I can't do it. If you win with Rublev, congratulations. I can't do it. I'm going to have to pass. Same thing with Rune. His draw is pretty good too, but he's been a head case, and he just battled an injury, or he claims he was injured when Fils was kicking his ass in the last event that we ended up seeing him in Hamburg. So I don't trust his durability and motivation. So I'm passing on Rune as well. I don't see the point. So because of that, I am going to go with one of the favorites, a guy that made a deep run in Wimbledon, and a guy that has not played on clay since, but I still like his overall form. Give me Musetti at 6-1. I think he checks a lot of boxes. I mentioned before with the deep runs in the past, you saw Papiron, Wawrinka, even at his old age, has a lot of firepower. Sinner and Alcaraz obviously do. Alcaraz does, and even Gasquet's backhand does. The point is, though, firepower does do well. And Musetti's backhand has been really, really effective recently, especially on grass. The forehand's been solid, too. I like his overall game. I think it translates well to these courts. And unlike Rublev and Rune, right now, his head is put on straight. Maybe not always. Musetti was awful a couple months ago. But I think 6-1 is a good price for a guy that just made the Wimbledon semi and a guy that is, historically speaking, a very solid clay player. Give me Musetti at 6-1. The draw is also pretty good. Does have a qualifier after the bye. So bye in the first round, qualifier in the second round. Then either Navone, Kaboli, Misalic, or Lahovic. I would have taken Navone or Kaboli, but of course they have to face off against each other in the first round, which should be an insane match, by the way, for a first round. The point is, though, Navone, Kaboli, and Lahovic should kill each other. So I'm not going to bother. I hope Musetti feasts on the scraps, but it is a wasted opportunity that Navone and Kaboli, in a draw that I think is somewhat open, both guys are against each other in the first round. That sucks. I would have taken one of the two. Unfortunately, I can't do it. So I am going to go with Musetti at 6-1. And for my other pick here, I did go with one long shot. I am not going to go with Papirin. Thought about Darderi, decided not to. Instead, I actually am going to go with a guy that actually played on Sunday, and he was very good. I'm going to go with Mueller at around 28-1. We saw him beat Rinaldi in straight sets, a solid win there. I remember Rinaldi actually made a decent run last year. I think he lost to Papirin in the semis, I think, but he made a good run, and Mueller beat him. And I thought that he beat him pretty soundly in straight sets. So I like the 4 Muellers in. He's another head case guy, but he's been good recently. And I think that he has the talent on clay to make it interesting. But at 28-1, his draw is not bad. To read off the draw, he has Sonigo or Croatian wild card in the second round. Sarundalo, we know that Sonigo can't win back-to-back matches this season. Then potentially Sarundalo, who's an absolute head case. So that's definitely I'd say that has upset potential to it with Mueller. And then he would have to face off against Rublev potentially in the semis. Or would that be the quarters, I mean? That would be the semis. So I think his draw is not that bad. At 28-1. Sarundalo's a head case. Rublev's a head case. Good enough for me. Give me Mueller 28-1. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the picks in Umag. Once again, the draw is not exactly that great. I would have made a case for Navone or Kaboli or both, but they were against each other in the first round, which is not fun for anybody. It's fun for the first round, but for an actual future bettor, that doesn't do you any favors. So I am going to go with Musetti and Mueller as my 2 picks in Umag. Now we have the fun part, which is Atlanta, which is going to be the U.S. hardcourt swing. So for the recent winners, a lot of Americans and de Minaur. That's basically it. You have Fritz beating Vukic. You have de Minaur beating Brooksby. You have Isner beating Nakashima and de Minaur beating Fritz. Fun fact, the event's been held 13 times as a 250, and an American, at least one American, has made the final in all 13 years. So once again, keep in mind, Americans might do pretty well in this event, and that might happen once again here this year. Now, for the actual outright picks here, got to read off the odds. Ben Shelton is the favorite, which is dangerous to some because we know Shelton can be a head case too. A lot of guys that you really don't want to be laying short numbers with, or at least I should say betting short numbers with to win events, but Shelton is around 350. Tiafoe's 450. Shapo is 6-1. You have Nakashima at 8-1, Fakina at 12-1, Kecmanovic at 16-1, Thompson at 18-1, Manarino at 20-1, Lloyd Harris at 22-1, George at 25-1, you have Vukic at 28-1, Rinderknich at 28-1, Opelka at 28-1, McDonald 28-1, Kokonakis at 28-1, Karatsev at 28-1, Goffin 28-1, Purcell, Nishioka, Kovacevic, and Kaza are all at 33-1. So to go through the actual path, Shelton, I know, is annoying to back at a cheap price. However, I have to read off the draw because the draw is pretty solid. Now, Shang can give him some problems, I'll admit it. Maybe Shapo can too, but I think Shelton is the better player, and I don't exactly trust Shapo. Shapo against Goffin in the first round is also not that easy for a first-round matchup, so I think Shelton is a decent draw here. Now, Shang can give him some problems, but I think Shelton will do a good job of actually defending his serve against Shang. So I am going to go with Shelton at around 350. I think that he fits a lot of the boxes for Americans who've won in the past. One common theme about the Americans here, very good serves. You have Fritz, you have Isner, you have Fritz again. I know that Brooksby does not have a great serve, but Nakashima has a pretty good serve. So the Americans, historically speaking, have done pretty well at actually serving here, and I do think that should be another, I'd say, factor you should be including for your actual picks is guys who have good serves, or at least who can win a bunch of free points on their respective serves. So I'm going to go with Shelton at 350 as one of my favorites. Second one, it's going to drive people nuts because I can't stand this guy. I've roasted this guy for a couple of years, but Bet Rivers did go rogue. I mentioned before Tiafoe's at 450. Bet Rivers has 6-1. I really could not turn down that extra $1.50. I am going to go Tiafoe at 6-1. I can't stand this damn guy, but his draw is really solid, and he also made a pretty good run in Wimbledon, so I think he's in somewhat decent form. A buy in the first round, then either Karatsev or Harris, so I like his draw there. Then either a matchup against Nakashima, McDonald, or basically Nishioka. That's a really tough section of 4 guys there, so I think that Tiafoe actually has a pretty decent draw to make it to the quarters and beyond. So give me Tiafoe at 6-1. If he loses early, then I'm just going to laugh at myself for backing him, but I think it's a decent draw, so I am going to go with Tiafoe at 6-1. Then I'm going to go with a couple of long shots here. Really not a fan of anybody in that middle group. I was trying to find anybody worth a damn. I didn't see any. Thought about maybe like a Jordan Thompson type because it feels like it would be his type of event. Unfortunately, though, he does face off against Kokonakis or Coric in the second round, so not a good draw at all for Thompson. Same thing with Kokonakis. Thought about him too, but I can't do it with that draw. And you're looking at the other options here. Thought about maybe Fokina, but Fokina's never won a title before, and I don't trust him mentally, so I don't exactly like that idea. You get my point, though. A lot of guys who might have some potential. For example, Kekmanovic is against Lloyd Harris in the first round. That's a really tough matchup. Like, I could have taken some guys if they were spread out, but there were a lot of really tough first-round matchups between a lot of guys I was tempted by, so I'm not going to take them. So I'm going to move on. So once again, Shelton and Tiafoe are my 2 short-priced American options for this event. Then we get to the fun part. I am going to go with Vukic at 33-1. He made the final here last year, and his draw is actually pretty nice. Matchup against Bellucci in the first round, which can be maybe a bit difficult, but Vukic I think is better, and I think he should win. Mannarino, though, in the second round off a bye. Mannarino's been awful for the last 3-4 months at this point, so I think Vukic has a pretty good path, especially based on the serve, to make it to the quarters. And then he'd face off against either Kekmanovic or Harris. That could be, once again, another toss-up match, but I think Vukic has a pretty good draw to the semis for a 33-1 shot. Sure, I'll take a flyer on that. I think that he can definitely get back to a final. We saw it last year, so I think that he can maybe get to the finish line, and I think 33-1 is a pretty good price. For the last one, this one is going to sound kind of out of left field because he doesn't have a great serve, and he's kind of been quiet recently, but he is always a threat on hard court in North America. Why? I have no idea, but Nishioka is good on hard courts in North America every year, and he randomly has some Cinderella run to like the semis all the time. So with that being the case, I am going to take him at 33-1. He's got the overall talent on hard court. It's his best surface, and you are looking at his path. I do think that he can end up getting past Svaja in the first round, let Nakashima and McDonald kill each other, and I think that Nishioka can potentially beat Tiafoe if that's a matchup that ends up happening in the quarters. Might be a bit of a flyer, maybe a donation, but 33-1 for a guy who, historically speaking, has been very good on hard courts in North America, I think it's tempting. I'll go with him at 33-1 to make a deep run. Anyway, so once again, my picks for all the events for the upcoming week. For Kitzbuhel, my outright picks are going to be Tabilo at 5-1. I'm going to go with Baez at 6-1, and I am going to go with Martinez, my long shot, at 18-1. For Umag, I kept it light. Give me Musetti at 6-1 and give me Mueller at 28-1. For my picks for Atlanta, I am going to go with Shelton at 350, Tiafoe at 6-1. As much as I hate it, I'm going to go with Vukic at 33-1, and I am going to go with Nishioka at 33-1 as well. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual outright picks for those 3 events. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks for the actual matches. Before we continue that, though, do want to take a quick word from our sponsor. We are brought to you by Rhythm because the British Open actually just ended, but they do have a lot of great options for golf in future events. They have WNBA stuff as well, and also Olympic basketball if you are going to be paying attention to that. So pay attention to Rhythm and their AI picks and props from Rhythm, because if you don't use them, you're missing out. They have also for golf, not just outright winners, they also have picks for top 5, top 10, and top 20. Use their AI Caddy to get some great data insights. You can even customize your own golf betting model using Rhythm's tools. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblers.com. sportsgamblers.com/RITHMM. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through the outrights in Kitzbuhel, Umag, and Atlanta. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. For the lock, I am going to go with the matchup in Atlanta between Kovacevic and Opelka. This one sounds dangerous, but it's kind of a principal play. I have to go with the under 26 games at minus 124. This I found offshore, so this was on Bet Online if you are trying to actually keep track. Point is, though, 26 at minus 124 means the only way you lose is a three-setter. And the match to end in straight sets, by the way, is minus 155. Now, of course, there's a push draw where if it ends 7-6, 7-6, you end up pushing, and that's unfortunate. But you're saving about 31 cents, hoping the match ends in straight sets. And I think that's a very good deal, especially based on Opelka and his lack of overall body of work for the last 2 years. He did basically nothing for 2 years trying to rehab his injury. Then he came back, made a semi, got absolutely buried against Mickelson on grass. Now he's going to hard court, and I'm just supposed to expect him to look completely fine with 1 day off in between. Like, I just think it's a terrible spot for Opelka. And Kovacevic might not be the best player in the world. He has firepower, though, and I do think he can get the job done. A lot of his matches for either winning or losing have ended quickly, as you're looking at 5 of Kovacevic's last 7 matches ending in straight sets. But Opelka has played one event in the last 2 years. Now he has 1 day off, and we have to avoid 3 sets. I feel like, once again, there's a lot more ways to win this than to lose this. You need 3 sets. It's the only way you lose. I got to go with it on principle. Give me the under 26 games here between Kovacevic and Opelka as my lock at minus 124. For my dog, you might remember our outrights episode last week. We actually took an Altmaier match against Kaboli, and we had the over 2.5 sets. So coincidentally, Altmaier's playing again, and we are going to take the same play. We're going to take the over 2.5 sets in the Altmaier and Gaston match this time at plus 135. 5 of Gaston's last 6 clay matches did not end in straight sets. He drops sets all the time. Not a great server, kind of a head case, but he has a lot of variety. And I think he's more like, if I had to compare him to anybody, I'd say he's like a worse man's Moutet. Pretty similar, undersized, a lot of variety, but also a head case. But the point is, he has had a lot of matches that have been marathons, either clay or even on grass. So that being the case, I do think Gaston is pretty accustomed to marathons, and I do think Altmaier is accustomed to them as well, because Altmaier's dropped at least 1 set in 8 straight matches. So that being the case, I expect each player to drop a set. I think at a marathon, pretty similar to the Kaboli match against Altmaier last week. Give me the same script. Give me the over 2.5 sets at plus 135. So once again, my picks for the show, the lock is going to be on Kovacevic and Opelka under 26 games at minus 124, and the dog will be on Altmaier and Gaston over 2.5 sets at plus 135. That's going to wrap it up. A reminder, back once again for the quarterfinals. Definitely for Kitzbuhel and Umag. Atlanta is going to be tricky, just based on how late the matches actually end in Atlanta. We might have to potentially punt it. So keep that in mind. Either way, though, until next time, find me on Twitter, @Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show, find me on the WNBA show, and find me on the MLB show as well. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.